Have you ever had a project where you weeded the same design over and over? Imagine cutting and weeding your design one time and then being able to use that as a stencil to screen print shirts, bags, signs, and more. And even better, you can wash and save the screen to use again and again. Hi, I'm Jennifer with Pigskins and Pigtails. I've been screen printing with vinyl for years and I love it so much that I've taught thousands of crafters how easy it is to master this process at home. Now they're creating shirts that feel great and hold up wash after wash. If you haven't tried screen printing with your vinyl cutter, be sure to watch my video comparing a screen printed shirt to one where you use iron-on or HTV directly on the shirt. One of the reasons I love screen printing is for the efficiency of cutting and weeding a design one time, attaching it to a screen, and then using that screen to make lots of shirts. Most of the time you will see me using Siser PSV, which is an adhesive vinyl. This sticks to the screen and can print one shirt or hundreds. Then I peel the vinyl off, wash my screen, and it's ready for the next project. Sometimes I have a design that I know I'll want to use again and again, like this mascot for a local high school or my logo. For designs like this that I know I'll want to be printing often, I like to use Siser Easy Weed, which is a heat transfer vinyl. By heat pressing the vinyl on the screen, you can create a permanent screen that can be washed and reused for years. Let me show you how easy it is to make this screen setup. First, I'm going to load my EasyWeed HTV in my Siser Romeo machine with the shiny side down. You want to cut on the matte side, so you need that to be facing up. I love that I can load my roll of HTV into the Siser machines without a mat, but if you have a Cricut or Silhouette, you can cut this vinyl by putting it on a mat. Next, we need to set up the design in our cutting machine software. I'm going to be using Siser's Leonardo Design Studio, but the process will be the same for other machines. You'll need to keep in mind the size of the screen printing frame that you're using. I'm going to use a 10 by 14 screen, but this process works with any size frame. So in the program, you want to scale your design to the size that you want it to print on your shirts. I'm going to go 10 inches tall, which makes the width about 8 inches. This is the max I'd want to go for the size screen that I'm using. With the design sized, click Send Design. On this screen, I like to add a weeding box around my design. You can do this by going to Arrange and Add Weed Box, or use the shortcut on your keyboard, which is the X key. Typically, I would just make this box just larger than my design, but for a permanent screen, I like to make it almost the same size as the frame I'm going to be using. So I'm going to adjust the box to just under 10 by 14. Then center your design inside this box. This is going to make lining it up on our screen much easier. Now here's the important step when using HTV with screen printing. You do not want to mirror the design. You'll see why in the next step. Send this to our cutter and Romeo takes over cutting the vinyl. Next up, we need to weed this, so start by taking off the excess around the weeding box. For screen printing, you're going to want to weed this design opposite of how you would if you were making a design to iron directly on your shirt. Take out the parts of the design where you want ink to go through. For designs like this with small details, I find using HTV so much easier to weed compared to adhesive vinyl. So another great reason to use this method if you have a design with small details. We're ready to apply this vinyl to our screen printing frame. Grab your screen printing frame, and I like to apply all of my vinyl to the back of my screen printing frame. So flip over the screen so you can see the side with the cording. This is the back. Now let's take it to our heat press. I'm using the Siser press, which is a 9 by 12 press, and it's the perfect size for these 10 by 14 screen printing frames. I place a piece of parchment paper on the press and then put my screen with the back facing up. And again, you can still see the cording, so you know this is the back. Then flip your vinyl over and place it on the screen with the vinyl side touching the screen, and the top is the shiny side. The carrier sheet is going to have a little stickiness to it, so it shouldn't move around. But if it curls up or you can't get it to stick down well, you can use pieces of heat-resistant tape on each corner to hold it down. With my press set to 280 degrees, I'm going to press for 15 seconds at a time. Notice my vinyl design doesn't fit all the way on the press at one time, So I'm going to move the screen around and press for another 15 seconds until I've pressed the entire piece of vinyl to the screen. If your entire design fits under your press, you can just press it one time for 20 seconds. The reason I start at a slightly lower temp than the EasyWeed recommends for shirts is that I don't want the adhesive to get so hot that it melts out and I lose my sharp lines. So I've found that starting lower and pressing a few times gets the HTV to stick without any distortion of the design. Now I can peel off the carrier sheet. If yours doesn't come off as easily as this, you can heat press a little longer. I like to do one more quick press with the piece of parchment paper still under the screen and another one on top. I go for about 5 seconds and move the frame around, making sure the edges are all pressed smoothly. You can also heat press your vinyl using an easy press. Since the screen doesn't lay flat on the other side, I'm heat pressing it on the top of the screen with a piece of parchment paper over both sides of the screen. You can use this same process with an Easy Press Mini or a household iron. But if you have a press that will fit your screen under it, I find it much easier to apply the vinyl using a press. This 15 by 15 heat press works great for my larger size frames. If your heat press doesn't fit your screen, you can remove the mesh from your frame and heat press the vinyl on this way. Then I put the mesh back in the frame. This is something I tried early in my screen printing, and I found that it's much easier to keep the mesh on the screen, but this is an alternative if you don't have an iron or a press that will work with your screen. So as you can see, there are a variety of ways to heat your transfer vinyl onto your screen. Notice how my vinyl goes almost to the edge of my frame, but there is a little gap where you can see through the screen. It's really hard to heat press it much closer to the edge than this, but we can easily cover up this gap with painter's tape so that ink doesn't go through the edges of our screen. You can apply the tape to the front or the back. I'm putting it along the front this time to make cleanup a little easier. Ink won't get into the edges of my frame here, but putting it on the back works just as well. I'm using my Pigskins and Pigtails screen printing press, and I'm going to slide my screen into the clamp. Using a press is going to make lining up the design on my shirt easier. Since we centered the design inside the weeding box, and then we line that up with the edges of the frame, I can now make sure my frame and shirt are both centered on the press. Apply your ink along the top of the screen. I'm using a water-based screen printing ink, but this process will work with Plastisol as well. I'm using a squeegee to pull that ink all the way over the design. It usually takes 2 to 3 times with the squeegee to get enough ink on the shirt or sweatshirt. Another benefit to using a press like this is that you can lift the screen and check to see how it looks. If I need to add more ink, the screen will lower back down in the exact same spot so I can squeegee over it again. If you're just getting started with screen printing, you can simply put your screen on top of your shirt. Just make sure you've smoothed out any bumps, and I like to put a piece of parchment paper inside the shirt to catch any ink that might go through. Hold the frame down with one hand and squeegee over with the other, and lift your screen to reveal your printed shirt. When you're all done printing, you can wash your screen off. Water-based ink is safe to clean off in the sink, so the cleanup is really easy. If you use Plastisol ink, you wouldn't be able to clean this off in the sink, but instead you would want to use a Plastisol cleaner. Since we used HTV on the screen, the design will stay in place as you wash it. Once it's dry, you can screen print again using a different color ink or save the screen until you need to print this design again. You have a couple of options when it comes to saving your screen. If this is a design I know I will reprint often, I will just dedicate this frame to this design and I will store it away just like this. But you can also take the mesh off of the frame when you're using frames like this with the cording. This doesn't take up as much room to store your designs, and you can buy refill mesh and save a little money by reusing the frame for another project. If you need to use this design again, you can put it back into the frame. This process can take a little practice to re-stretch the mesh. Sometimes your design may look a little distorted if you don't get it back in the mesh just the same as it was the first time, so you might have to take it out and try again. So while this is a doable process, I find it so convenient when I can just grab this frame with my logo on it and print a shirt with very little setup. So I tend to leave most of mine in the frames. You can also apply HTV to metal frames like this one. Just know that you're gonna have a permanent design on your screen since you can't change the mesh out on these as easily as you can with the corded frames. I've used these frames for years to print my logo and they have held up great. If I ever notice a part of the HTV lifting up, you can heat press it back down again and it will stick back to the screen. If this is your first time to watch me screen print using vinyl, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more tips and check out my other videos. This one explains how I decide to use adhesive vinyl versus HTV on my screen.